I would say that living in the modern world that is so media saturated, finding your own unique voice and developing it is a must. It's not like a key to success, it's more of a necessary prerequisite to having a chance to succeed and to live a life fully and with a sense of satisfaction. It's nice to know that this is my voice, I have developed in it, it is mine, and I'm using it. And I'm not claiming that you should necessarily use the information from your natal chart to develop it, but maybe give it a try, because from what I have observed in people I know, their authentic voice usually has a lot to do with their natal Mercury. So if this is a task that you are thinking of taking on, and you are interested in exploring different possibilities, it may be surprisingly useful. I am Nadia, the astrologer for people who do not believe in astrology, but who use their natal charts as a tool for self-exploration, to get suggestions and explore different possibilities. And this is the video about developing your authentic voice based on what Mercury in your natal chart is doing. So Mercury in our charts is our personal information broker on one hand and communication specialist on the other hand. It is, however, so versatile and so flexible. It's almost like it's always lending itself to other planets. So if you know somebody's Mercury sign, it wouldn't tell you as much about this person as the sign of the other quick planets in the natal chart. And this has to do with the function of communication. You always use communication to some end, but it also comes back to what Mercury's function was in the mythical world. And in the mythical world, Mercury, or Hermes, as he was called in ancient Greece, was the messenger god. It was always transmitting messages from one god to the other, or from mortals as well. And this is super relevant. I will return to this. But it also had other very cool features, I would say. It could breach borders, including the borders between the worlds. It could steal and lie and trick people and gods as well. It was both intellectual, which is expected, but also sexual. And sexual not in terms of deep intimacy, but more sexual curiosity and quick transmission of genetic information. So people with strong Mercury can also be sexually adventurous, as well as intellectually impressive or productive. But this messenger function is what made him truly special. It made him connected to a lot of other deities and mortals. So it was never alone. Okay, it was sometimes alone, very rarely. Most of the times in connection with someone. When he's not on an assignment from some god or other, he is probably scheming and lying to some god or other, or having sex with someone. So it is a very relational planet. And just like in myths, in a natal chart, it's not just the sign of Mercury that defines it. A sign gives it a certain flavor, I will be talking about it, but also which planets it is working with or against. So to find your unique voice based on the Mercury in your natal chart, it is not enough to just examine the sign. It's also very important to consider other things, which I will talk about now, but let's go through the signs, and then within each sign, I will tell you what to look out for, what to consider. And we start with Mercury in Aries. Now, this Mercury is considered trigger happy. It snaps, it fires, it shoots remarks, It treats information or knowledge as weapons, and it wouldn't hesitate to use these weapons. It basically wants to win. Every planet in Aries wants to win. However, a lot depends on what the ruler of Aries does in your chart if you have Mercury in Aries. Because this Mercury in Aries, is on an assignment from the planet Mars. So it's doing Mars's bidding. So if this is your Mercury, look at the sign and the house that Mars is occupying. For example, if it's Mars in Virgo, Mars in Virgo wants to craft its victory. It wants to know how exactly it came to be and how to do it again. It wouldn't want to use the weapons that your Mercury in Aries has at its disposal without proper intelligence. It actually may be looking for critique, for advice, because in its mind, these are the steps to winning. And so your Mercury will be more deliberate, more step by step, more critical of itself, while being this hot, snappy Mercury in Aries. Is your Mars in Libra? Well, then for this Mars and this Mercury, the victory will be sweeter and surer if you can convince people to join you, if you can make allies out of opponents, or if you could at least make them doubt their convictions. Mars in Libra wants to fight for connections, for alliances. If Mars is in Aries, then this is a slightly lonelier placement, because this combination of Mars and Mercury will want to first and foremost convince themselves, and this may alienate some other people. And same with houses. If you have Mercury in Aries, go and look for which house your Mars is occupying. This will be the area of life where Mercury is trying to help you be victorious. Now, what about Mercury in Taurus? I made such a beautiful, funny Instagram post about how Mercury in Taurus is all about non-verbal signals like grunts and moaning. I'm so proud of it. I will give a link to it. But that was a joke. So Mercury in Taurus really is good at all of that, but it's not the point. The Mercury is ruled by Venus, and Venus wants to seduce, not just sexually. It wants us to see the beauty in the beautiful things or appreciate the worth of high value assets. And yes, if you want to convey just how wonderful something is, non-verbal signals may be very helpful. But apart from this general gusto, the voice of this Mercury depends very much on which sign Venus, the ruling planet of Taurus, is occupying. Is it in Aries, for example? Well, that would make you seductive and competitive. You would want to close deals or win sexual partners, or be the first one to discover an artist with a lot of potential. If Venus is in Gemini, we have a bit of a recursive situation, because then Mercury is ruled by Venus, but Venus is ruled by Mercury, and they kind of like pour into each other's glasses. So this combination is making the seductive Mercury more flirty, eager to use its wit to seduce, and its taste to spike interest. It wants to seduce, yes, by being media savvy or witty or sensitive to context, because these are the values that drive Venus. Is Venus in Cancer? Then the seduction of Mercury will be more caring and more gentle. It will be creating this verbally safe space, and by being accepting and well-versed in psychologically informed language. So if you have Mercury in Taurus, look at where your Venus is, both the sign and the house, to know where and how this Mercury will want to sound seductive. Now, Mercury in Gemini rules itself. So here this rulership trick is a bit useless. And in general, Gemini Mercury is very much attracted to text, to the power of text and of media and of other mediums to convey meaning. It wants to have a go at it. It wants to produce content or teach or become prolific in visual modes of communication. So here, to narrow down exactly how it's supposed to do that, we don't look at the rulership because it's similar for every Mercury in Gemini, but at other aspects which this Mercury is forming, because then we would know which planets it is working together with. For example, do you also have Saturn in Sagittarius, so that because Gemini and Sagittarius are opposing each other, this will make Saturn oppose the Mercury, and this is a hard aspect. So this Mercury will be always working with Saturn. Saturn demands that your voice will have some weight. There must be some proof of work in what you're saying, some evidence that what you're saying comes as a result of hard work. Do you have Venus in Gemini? If yes, and especially if it's very close to the Mercury, it means that you will have to be more friendly, more diplomatic, invest more in building friendly relationships with people, or maybe doing the intellectually stimulating work together with people you like. And yes, also look at the house that the Mercury is occupying, because this will be the area of your life where Mercury will have more influence. And now Mercury in Cancer. This one is, it has to be very much attuned to how you feel inside, to what your intuition is telling you, what your gut is telling you, what feels right to you. It's also known for being measured in what it shares, depending on how safe it is to share things. So it's cautious and introspective. But who does it serve? And the answer is the moon. If you have Mercury in Cancer, look for where the moon is in your chart, the sign, the house, etc. Mercury in Cancer that is serving the moon in Leo will necessarily be more expressive, evocative, more like an entertainer, or an expressive lover in appropriate doses, because it's also measured. With moon in Gemini, Mercury in Cancer will be, again, more chatty, will produce more content, maybe even hiding the emotionally charged parts behind the sheer volume of the content it produces. With the moon in Virgo, this Mercury in Cancer will be more self-critical. It will apologize more than other Mercuries, will use more self-deprecating language, will be more orderly as well. But it's still essentially the same, attuned to itself, Mercury in Cancer. So if your Mercury is in Cancer, learn about the moon in your natal chart and try to find out what it needs and develop your voice accordingly. And now Mercury in Leo. With Mercury in Leo, you do not have a lot of options, because astrology works the way that we look at everything from Earth, and Mercury is very close to the Sun, so Mercury, if looked at from Earth, cannot be very far away from the Sun. So if your Mercury is in Leo, your Sun, so your normal zodiac sign, can be either in Leo or in Virgo or in Cancer. If you are Leo with Mercury in Leo, then the house becomes extremely important. Yes, you will inevitably talk a lot about yourself, deal with it. Your voice will have a narcissistic tone to it, and you will probably be accused of that. But you will talk about yourself as whom. That is very often explained by the house. And the house will also tell you a lot about your target audience. If you are a Cancer with Mercury in Leo, you are more likely to talk about the things or people that you care for, or about your own psychological insights. Basically, a Cancer sun is nourishing something quietly. And then the Mercury in Leo is giving this thing or this knowledge or this sensibility voice. First comes something that requires careful attention, which is what you care for, or your personal psychology, and then talking about it in an evocative, expressive manner. If you are a Virgo with Mercury in Leo, your expressive Mercury will be trying to make an exciting story of something very Virgoan. It could be the ways in which you are trying to improve your life, for example, or the particular details of your life. Almost like you are giving a director's treatment to a movie about yourself that must have a good, grip on all of the details that will be shown there. So it still is about what's going on with your life, just with less of a focus on your internal processes, as would have been with Sun in Cancer, and with less focus on you as this strong and wise and wonderful person as with Sun in Leo, and more focused on the details, on things that you are working on or that you critique. Okay, now Mercury in Virgo, just like Mercury in Gemini, rules itself. But it is a slightly different ruler because it's in a different sign. It's less all over the place and more to the point. It loves concrete things to talk about. An artist, a trip, a sport. It loves specializing in something and then giving its expert opinion. Basically, if your Mercury is in Virgo, you may be very talkative to a group of colleagues or to your audience that is subscribed to your blog where you're an expert. Or you would love to talk about the work or the stresses of the work, or be a star on LinkedIn. Or you may be very talkative talking to your hobbyist buddies, but not as good at small talk. And just like with Mercury in Gemini, the aspects that your Mercury in Virgo is forming will be very important. So for example, if your Mercury in Virgo is forming a hard aspect, a square to Uranus in Sagittarius, then your voice must be either rebellious or just weird, different from the others. You must learn how to sound competent, because this is what your Mercury is about, so that people take you seriously when you say something that other people are not saying. If there is Jupiter right next to your Mercury in Virgo, you will develop an intellectual appetite for generalizations, for sense making. This is what Jupiter loves to do. You will not be satisfied with only talking details. You will want to sound as a competent girl or guy, but competent in a more general way, competent and wise, having an overview. If, for example, you have a moon opposing, like a moon in Pisces opposing your Mercury in Virgo, then your voice would be the voice of reason, making sense of feelings, of needs, of emotional vulnerabilities. So with Mercury in Virgo, specialize and look at the aspects that Mercury is forming. And now Mercury in Libra. Libra is another Venus-ruled sign, but the Mercury here is different. It belongs to an air element, so it's more verbal than Mercury in Taurus, and it's more relational. It's less interested in selling or in just seducing, and more interested in building relationships. Building relationships maybe that last, relationships that benefit both parties. It's a diplomat, and it's also very interested in being civilized and fair. And this is also a difficulty with this Mercury, because when you have this Mercury and you are approached by a person who is fuming and who wants to complain and to be told you're right, this Mercury will still try to be fair and realistic, and this usually only makes people more frustrated and more angry. The diplomatic efforts of this Mercury are not a thing in itself. They serve a purpose, and what this purpose is explained by the placement of Venus. And for example, if this Venus is in Scorpio, then this Mercury will be looking for passionate, deep people with whom it is possible to, within a framework of mutual respect, to explore even the dangerous and unpopular truths, as well as truths that contradict other truths. So go into an intellectually and psychologically uncomfortable territory. It wants to be in alignment with conversational partners, but the topics must be deep. If Venus is in Libra, then this is your classic civilized Mercury that knows how to use poetic language, knows how to give a compliment, but also how to demand fair treatment. If Venus is in Virgo, we may again hear the voice of someone who identifies with their profession or their vocation. What I do is how I talk. But unlike Mercury in Virgo, this one is either more artsy, more, I don't know, eager to use imagery to convey the message or to curate an image of its crafting, or it's more into being in a dialogue. So this is about me, what is about you, in asking questions, in exchanging experiences. But in general, yes, if you have Mercury in Libra, look at what your Venus is doing, and yes, try to be relational, try to be fair. Now, Mercury in Scorpio is deep, and it wants to get even deeper, to uncover some truths, to investigate, to know how things really are. Just like Mercury in Aries, it is also ruled by Mars. And in some way, it also kind of like wants to win. But what it also wants is to have the courage needed to know the truth, to acknowledge the truth, to ask dangerous questions about the truth. It wants to be hardcore enough for the truth. And yes, it makes sense to look at what the Mars is doing in the natal chart to get some clues about what kind of truth that is. So if Mars is in Virgo, then this truth will be more down to earth and the opposite of grandiose. It will be allergic to statements that are too general. It may enjoy poking at those general, pompous, grandiose views. If Mars is in Aquarius, then the truths will be either controversial, too ahead of their time, or very socially minded, progressive, or just relating to how society really works. If Mars is in Capricorn, then Mercury in Scorpio will be incredibly sensitive to hierarchies and to power distribution and realpolitik. And then look also at the house that the Mars is occupying, because this is the area of life where a lot of the person's intellectual activity will be focused on. Now, Mercury in Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, the god that also in myths is very often sending Mercury on different assignments. In general, Mercury in Sagittarius wants to appear wise, educated, worldly, experienced, like it had a rich life, full of all kinds of experiences, that it speaks from experience, not just books, not like it didn't read the books, but it also has the experience. And so you look at which sign Jupiter occupies to get further hints. So for example, if Jupiter is in Capricorn, then this experience will probably have a lot to do with profession or with whatever this person was doing that brought them results, respect, and authority. It can also stress connections and high social status, because those things really help to get the message across. If Jupiter is in Pisces, then there is an affinity with transcendent experiences, with being charmed, impressed, hypnotized. It is an experience of being in touch with something that is beyond the life that we mostly live. With Jupiter in Taurus, it's more of an experience of being close to things that have extremely high value, of being a connoisseur, of knowing what has real value and what doesn't, again, from experience. But of course, the houses of Mercury and Jupiter are also important. They will help define the message, the voice, the audience, the topics, the positioning of the self. Now, Mercury in Capricorn is another sober, sometimes self-deprecating Mercury. It is ruled by Saturn, and Saturn is always strict no matter the sign. So it is hard for this Mercury to be overly cheerful and carefree. Its voice is more tempered and also very often humorous, but this is the humor that is supposed to show just how many hardships the person with Mercury in Capricorn has been through. It is not cheap humor, it is earned humor. And the sign and the house of Saturn is putting some further demands on this Mercury's performance. So if it's Saturn in Scorpio, then this person must have had some transformational things to go through that were really dramatic, like the life as before is impossible and you have to reinvent yourself. It's an experience of having your naive ideas about what your future may be like destroyed, an experience of being humbled, which this sort of experience can also be empowering. And going through those scorpionic transformational experiences, one learns that some things get destroyed while others are remaining, and the confidence in the things that remain grows. And this, the Mercury in Capricorn will be talking about if Saturn is in Scorpio. If Saturn is in Capricorn, then there is less emphasis on drama and more on the actual labor and the actual losses. And then the tone is less of, this is how I became very deep and knowledgeable about the world, and more of, this is what my life was like, and I am not entirely content with it or with myself. But I did a lot of actual work. With Saturn in Virgo, the focus is more on the experience in working, yes, but also in working on the details, gathering a treasure chest filled with examples, stories, details, tricks, tools, concrete, tried and true individual things that help one be more convincing and productive and respected, is what this Mercury will be gathering. Now, Mercury in Aquarius is an outsider Mercury, and it has this outsider approach and tone. It's like it's looking at things from a distance without getting carried away or without joining the mood of everyone in the room or the consensus opinion on the matter. They're always ready, the people with Mercury in Aquarius, to look at it from a different angle, to take a step back, to reconsider, which doesn't mean that they are flaky. They can be actually very opinionated and true to their opinions. But those opinions are more often confrontational rather than conciliatory. This Mercury is ruled by Saturn, and then in some systems also by Uranus. And Mercury is absolutely able to serve the two gods, even if they are at odds with each other. So let's say if Saturn is in Pisces, then the Mercury in Aquarius will have an outsider's opinion regarding all things transcendental. how to go beyond something, how to not be limited by the limitations that are obvious to most people. But it's still Saturn. So whatever the message is, even if it's about transcendence, it must also be about the work that is needed to achieve it. Something that is worth respect. Let's say Saturn is in Scorpio. Here we again have this story of a deep transformational experience, of a life-changing crisis, of knowing that anyone can be humbled. But if Uranus, another ruler of Aquarius, is in Sagittarius, then this deep knowing outsider voice automatically becomes more optimistic. Like, we're all going to die, but there's still so much to see, and I can still learn some weird thing that will make me even more unique and weird. Maybe Saturn is in Aquarius. That would make this Mercury more of an iconoclast. It will then be able to perform wonders of emotional detachment to form its opinions. But put Uranus in Leo, and then suddenly there's a lighter, warmer streak that may be self-aggrandizing, but also fun, maybe artistic. And for Mercury in Pisces, well, Pisces is another dual rulership sign ruled by Jupiter and Neptune. It has a character of its own, of course. Every planet in Pisces has some sort of access to something greater, to the transcendent, the divine, the sublime, or it has a hunger for it. Well, Mercury in Pisces also longs for this sublime, this transcendent thing, but it is limited to its own tools, which is words, images, gestures. It's a poetic placement, but also a frustrating one because of this limitation. If we place both of the rulers of this Mercury in Pisces in Sagittarius, so Jupiter and Neptune go in Sagittarius, then the language of this Mercury will be that of generalizations and hope. It will try to understand life in the hope that the understanding, the making sense that is very Sagittarian, will lead to a better life. And this is a very charming combination. If, for example, we leave Neptune in Sagittarius, but Jupiter is moved to Libra, then this hope and this sense-making will have a different angle, that of looking for balance and investing in good relationships of any kind. If we take someone who is born later with Neptune in Capricorn, that takes away some of the hopefulness and makes dealing with reality more important, but without losing the poetry, the sense that there is something greater, something transcendent about this experience. And then the position of Jupiter will point to which aspects of this reality attract more attention. If it's in Scorpio, then the darker ones, the ones that have more stored, compressed energy in them. If it's in Gemini, it gives this Mercury more of an opportunistic character. So I apologize for this video being more technical and more complicated than the other placement videos. I genuinely tried to make it as breezy as the other ones. Like if your moon is in Libra, this tells me everything about your emotional needs or such. But I went through my incredibly long list of people I know and their placements. And at least with them, this more complicated way of looking at Mercury makes way more sense. And after I figured that out, I started reading more about Mercury and Hermes and the mythology and the incredibly versatile character that Mercury has there, and how it's eager to allow the other gods to work through it. So if you are a beginner and if you find this all a little bit confusing, go check out my video on how to use ChatGPT as your astrologer and skip to the section where I explain how to do it. It's called something like 3 things to do before you start, and do that. And then try to describe the voice of your Mercury, considering not just its sign and house, but also what its ruling planet or its ruling planets are doing, which signs they're occupying, which houses, and also considering the aspects that Mercury is forming and the topics and angles that these other planets that are ruling Mercury or are making an aspect to Mercury are bringing to the table, are asking the Mercury to convey. And now is the time to describe a very special case. What if you have Mercury in Gemini or Virgo and it's not forming any major aspects to any other planets? It basically means that it has no assignments given to it by other planets, by other gods. It's free to do with its time, with its voice, whatever it pleases. This is a wild card. This Mercury can be unpredictable. So it can be unproductive, like too much internal dialogue that leads nowhere, or too much self-criticism, or a media addiction. Or it may be so much into mischief that it creates troubles for you. Or it could be a wonderfully unruly and determined Mercury that drags you into all kinds of good trouble and leaves your other planets to deal with what you find there. My theory is that an unaspected Mercury in Gemini or Virgo is best treated as an interesting animal with very strong instincts that demands respect and that cannot be allowed to have the steering wheel in your life. So an amazing thing to have, but you need to be watchful of it. If you have such a Mercury and if you have learned how to deal with it, then I'd be happy to hear more about it. Go and write about it in the comments. And so and subscribe if you want to get more of those placement videos. And I will stop now and start working on the June forecasts. See you in the next videos.